Alrighty. So today I just want to give you no Spider-Woman powers yet. I just want to give you all a heads up that we are going to be discussing Tyre Nichols, of course, as the body cam footage was released today, and obviously we are not watching the video, but we will be covering just everything that's happened with that. And then I also want to take a look at the what's going on with Democrats pushing for an assault weapons ban in the wake of there being more mass shootings this year than there have been days, particularly the 2 mass shootings in the last week that targeted Asian communities and where semi-automatic weapons were used that seem to have been obtained legally. So I just want to give you all a heads up. If you've had enough of listening to police brutality discourse today, I will not find it offensive if you go to another stream that might be a little bit lighter. But yeah. So, anywho. And I just want to reiterate that we are not watching the body cam footage on this stream. I absolutely just do not think it is an appropriate place to be showing the footage. If this is something that you find necessary to watch.
A tier 1 sub to closet_optimist.
Thank you, Hogan.
They have given 17 gift subs in the channel.
If you feel inclined to watch the footage, that's something that I suggest you can do on your own time. But I don't. Here's what I'll say about it. So I watched as much of it as I could. It was heartbreaking and horrible and all the things that people have been saying about it online. Unfortunately, it didn't seem to be a unique thing, right? I didn't watch that and go, wow, that's never happened before. This is a one-off case. No, I watched that and I went, yeah, that seems pretty typical, actually, when we've had cases that make national news because of police violence. That's the crazy thing, right? It's like, I went into this knowing that it was going to be a really hard video to watch, and it was, absolutely. I don't see how something like this couldn't be hard to watch, even if it's happened time and time again. However, I think it's important to talk about the fact that this shit is not new. This is not unique. This is something that happens and will happen again because of the way that our police institution operates in this country. It is inherently racist. Okay, it is an institution that was formed on the backbreaking of black people in this country, of slaves. It was created to protect white people and white capital. And unfortunately, even in 2023, that is still very much so a part of policing today. So, obviously there's a lot of discussion that's happening with, well, the police officers were black, so that means that this is not racial bias. And yes, it is. Comment leader, thank you for the 3 months. I think similarly to the mass shootings that happened this week, where it was Asian elders who were targeting Asian elders, there were a lot of people, particularly on the right, who looked at that and said, well, obviously it's fine because it's Asian on Asian violence. This has nothing to do with racism. This has nothing to do with gun control. The guns aren't the problem here, okay? You Asians figure it out. And the thing is, Okay, the thing is that when we're looking at mass shootings, even when the motives are different, even when the shooters are different, there is one thing in common, and that is accessibility to weapons of mass, the mass loss of life, right? These are people who are being able to obtain weapons that can kill a lot of people in seconds. Okay, that is the thing that is at the center of most of these mass shootings. And then when we look at police violence, right, police brutality, doesn't matter if the police are Asian. It doesn't matter if the police are black. It doesn't matter if they are white, right? They all have one thing in common, and that is being police officers, okay? Their race is cop, right? It's not black people, it's cop. Yeah. And again, this is not an instance of a few bad apples in the Memphis police force. This is an issue of having an institution that is just rotten. It is completely rotten. And it doesn't matter if there's some nice shiny parts of the apple. If it's rotten in the core, it's rotten. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so
Don't miss your shot.
why is there a commercial?
If you're turning 65 or retired.
Okay, so for those of you who are not planning on watching the audio is the worst part. It was terrible. For those of you who are not planning on watching the footage, I will provide a I will just provide a very brief summary. Essentially, and the reason I want to do that is because I think that there are important questions that need to be answered, right? That go beyond just these 5 police officers, really 7 police officers, but the 5 who have been indicted on murder. There are questions that we need to ask that need to be answered because it speaks to the entirety of the Memphis police force and not just these 5 officers. So, question number 1. What was the reason for pulling over Tyre Nichols? If this was a traffic stop and the reason that they pulled him over was reckless driving, well, as of right now, we don't understand what that was for. And when the police chief Davis, who is a black woman and is the one who has really been front and center on this entire thing, when she was asked if it was a justified stop, she said, I don't think so, essentially, was what she said. So, like, why does this continue to happen where somebody is pulled over for a traffic stop, okay, and then they end up dead, right? Like, there is something that we need to address here. Okay, question number 2. Why were these officers who were a part of the Memphis Scorpion Unit, which is a special police unit that has been formed to combat crime, right? Like really, really bad crime in hot spots in the city. Why were the members of Scorpion the ones who pulled over Tyre Nichols for a traffic stop? What's going on there? Okay, is this something that has been happening, or was it just a one-off thing? Why were members of a special crime unit that was specifically formed and funded in order to combat dangerous crime in the worst parts of Memphis. Why are they pulling him over for reckless driving? Okay. Three. The way that they acted in the footage is that within pulling him over, they immediately resorted to violence. Now, is this something that these police officers just specifically did themselves and they just decided to do that? Or is this how they are trained? Right? Did you watch the video of the pullover? Yes. When they pulled over Tyre, this is what happened. One of the cops shows up, whose footage is in one of the videos. Within seconds of pulling him over, they violently drag him out of the car as he's got his hands up and is like, okay, chill, please. Like, it's fine. Like, what's going on? Obviously he's scared. He is confused. He doesn't know why. He keeps asking, like, what did I do? I didn't do anything wrong. Because the brutality and the violent way of handling him was so swift. It's like they pulled him over and then immediately ripped open the door, ripped him out. He was trying to de-escalate the situation. Yes. They throw him to the ground. One of the cops says, "I'm going to tase this bitch." Okay, they're swearing at him, they're screaming. They have taken the situation to a 10 before we even know what's going on. Meanwhile, he is on the fucking ground. He's on the ground and they're screaming at him to put his arms around his back, and then they're screaming at him to get on the ground, but he's already on the ground. And so I'm like, what is happening here? What is going on? He is on the ground. You're screaming at him to get on the ground. There are 5 of you. Is this something that is just normal? Are there supposed to be this many, 5 officers who are handling one unarmed, black man who also happens to be very light in stature? Okay. He is a skinny black man who is being violently manhandled by 5 police officers, many of whom are like big and burly. Okay. So what happens then is they have the taser out. They're holding the taser up to him. They're saying that that they're going to tase him. They're like, I'm going to tase you. I'm going to tase you. One of them has like pepper spray or something. It is obviously a very scary situation. And at one point, Tyre breaks away because it turns out he's 2 minutes away from his mom's house, which is heartbreaking. Okay. He's 2 minutes away from his mom's house. He's scared to death. He gets up. He starts running in the direction of his mom's house. The cops chase after him. They catch up with him, and then they beat the fuck out of him. Even when it's clear that he is unconscious and not able to do anything. And before he becomes unconscious, he is crying out for his mom, because he was so close. He was yards away from her house. And these officers just enacted violence on this poor man in a way where, if you were watching this footage and one of the videos has no audio, so you're watching them hold his arms back behind him as various police officers just come up and pummel him with their fists, hit him with a baton, kick him. You would have thought it was like members of a gang, which it fucking was, right? If you want to look at the police that way, which we should, that it was members of a gang who had caught a member of a rival gang and were beating the shit out of him, taking turns. It was horrible. And, they're screaming at him, "Give me your hands," but they have his arms wrenched behind him. And yeah, it's terrible. And unfortunately though, this is not, like I said, a unique situation. And so why this situation is tricky is because of a few factors. One being that the Memphis Police Department is acting very swiftly, right? That is good. It is good to act swiftly. It is good to take this seriously. The officers, Tyre Nichols passed away on January 10th, 3 days after the incident. They were suspended and then fired from the officers from the line of duty, and now they have been indicted on multiple charges, including second-degree murder. That is good. But the way that this is being talked about in the media and online is problematic for, like I said, a few reasons. One being that it's kind of being presented as this individual and unique act of police brutality, which it is not. It doesn't take away from this being a horrifying thing that happened and the footage being absolutely awful, but it is not a one-off thing, right? And then two, the fact that largely, with the exception of, I just saw now that, of course, like Tucker Carlson on Fox News is talking about how this there are a lot of people who are all about back the blue, right? It's like you have a situation where a cop is in trouble because a black man is dead. Back the blue, they're going to be online saying this is not the cop's fault, okay? It has largely been quiet because these police officers are black, right? And it's looked at as, oh no. No. Those are black men. Those are not police officers, okay? Those are black men who killed another black man. Another black man. Like, that's the situation there. And yeah, like I said, like a lot of people have been saying, the race is cop, right? These are cops. These are cops who killed a black man. And yes, they are black, but it does not mean that they are not acting with racial bias because they are black. They are cops first and foremost. Okay, so dude, Don Lemon is on the ground.
Meeting of Tyre Nichols, which came out just about 2.5 hours ago, and about the reaction here in Memphis. Shimon Prokopez is here with more on that. Shimon, let's talk about these officers are charged with. If you look at the video, I mean, they charged them immediately, and I think this video speaks to that. We got a warning of that, but second-degree murder, kidnapping. Yeah.
Right. The kidnapping, the second-degree murder, and then the official misconduct. And, you look at this video and you can see why the DA and the
there were white cops that were involved in that as well.
Charges and firing those officers. The other thing that's really interesting, there are more officers there, and the police chief has indicated that those officers are under investigation, and we could see more charges, whether administrative charges or criminal charges. Even the DA has said that's a possibility here for others. The other thing for me, I think, in watching all of this is so much of how we are watching yet again another failure by people who are supposed to protect us, supposed to save us. And you look at those EMTs,
yes,
and they just do nothing
the
for such a
EMTs
long
did
stretch
nothing.
of time, and it takes them so long to finally take him to the hospital. I know that part
It's
for
about
me,
25 minutes.
any hope for Tyre Nichols to survive, to live that
about
day.
25 minutes where he is very clearly suffering and you know, slipping in and out of consciousness and is just fucked up 7 ways to Sunday. They call the EMTs over, and then they all stand around. They all stand around as he rides and, you know, and is on the ground. And he is so fucked up that at one point, all fucking 7, 8, 9 people, however many people were on the scene, at one point, no one's even watching him because of how beaten he is, that they know he's not going anywhere. I'm not kidding. There's a part where everyone kind of walks, they're crowding around him, and then they walk away and they're having various conversations, and he's just on the ground by himself. Because clearly that man cannot go anywhere. He has been so severely beaten.
The opening moments of the video that were released, that unit right now is not operating here in the city of Memphis. The mayor announced that they've been inactive since this incident. The family is calling for them to end that unit, disband that unit.
Well, when I spoke to the police department earlier, they said that they will be in review. There will be a review of all specialized units. Currently, the Scorpion unit is inactivated during this review process, but it has not been disbanded, they say. You have to remember
that's what the family wants. The family wants it.
I don't think
disbanded.
it's going to be disbanded.
Well, we'll see. This has happened before.
They said you have to remember that we have about 10 specialized units that work similar to the Scorpion unit. It is not the unit. They're necessary. In this case, it is the officers who by chance were assigned to the Scorpion units.
These units have been controversial, Don. I know, just give me a second here. In the sense of that there was a street crime unit in the New York City. You remember Amadou Diallo when they stopped him. That's what this kind of unit was. And so it was disbanded eventually, and then it comes back, they put him under different names. It could happen. And the families are calling for that, and other people who want to see more police reform are saying we need to end these units.
Yeah,
so
we'll see. There will be changes. There have to be changes after this. Shimon, thank you. Stand by. Shimon has been covering this from the very beginning. I want to bring in now Benjamin Crump, one of the attorneys for the Nichols family. Ben Crump, hello to you, sir. I was with you this morning with the family. I'm so glad that you could join us and help us get through what we're seeing here. Why was it important for the family, for the public, to see this video, despite how devastating it must be emotionally for them?
Well, John Lemon, that was a very powerful interview this morning, and thank you for helping heal the family by letting them have a voice to tell their truth about this tragedy. And it is tragic. I was just talking with Tyre's mother and father, and she is just so disturbed hearing about the video, but she felt it was necessary that people needed to see the video, even if she couldn't see the video.
Yeah, maybe we don't call this a Scorpion unit.
How and why her son was killed.
I know it's an acronym,
what
but
everybody is saying, Don Lewis, who has now seen this video, is not only how gruesome it is, how heinous it is, how appalling it is, and you can go all through the alphabet with the adjectives, and then you get to the end, and how unnecessary this was, that Tyre Nichols was killed in this manner.
Ben, are you, I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing. I don't know if you can get a little bit closer to the computer, or I don't know if there's an air conditioning or something on, but I just want to know, how do you feel so far with the action that has been taken, the charges of these officers, you know, second-degree murder? The family had wanted first-degree murder, and the speed with which this all was handled, and the video rolling out?
Do we know anything about the local organizing and what the reaction to this
Don,
is
I'm
going to be
putting it
like?
in for you.
There are currently peaceful protests
Yeah,
that are
take your
happening
time.
right
That's
now.
okay.
I know in New York.
It said,
Okay.
he said it's fine on air that they can hear you. That's
Okay.
better, though.
So Don, hopefully you heard what I said about
In
how heinous it was,
Memphis.
but the family and everybody is saying how unnecessary this was.
There's
Their
a
actions of those
specific reason
officers that
they released
killed
the
this
video when they
unarmed
released
young
it.
black man. And so that's what they're dealing with. They're also, as the family, talking about Tyre's family, when they were watching the video, and then I started getting hit up on my phone and social media about, hey, there are other officers here who need to be charged. And they asked questions about a white officer who they said tased him in the beginning. And why wasn't he charged? So it's a lot more questions that needs to be answered after this video has been made public. And you can ask your other question again. I want to say that on behalf of Tyre's family.
Okay, so got you. Thank you. And I appreciate you putting in the earpiece. So what do you think of the way this was rolled out? The charges, the officers then being apprehended,
Yeah, we're
the
gonna
speed with which this was handled, and then
we're gonna
the
talk about
rolling
like
out of the video.
what
You
should
know,
be
Don,
happening
let me
next.
first address the charges being issued, because when you think about how swiftly they terminated these officers and how swiftly the district attorney, in less than 20 days, charged these 5 black officers for the crimes that they committed that were captured on video, it told us very clearly, as the chief said, the community needed to see action taken swiftly, and the community needed to see swift approach to justice. Well, this is now the blueprint, Don Lemon, for all these other police forces around the country. If they catch police committing crimes on video, whether they're white or black, this is the blueprint. Because think about it, Don Lemon. Laquan McDonald in Chicago, they had that video day one. The white officers, they said they had to investigate for over a year. Then you think about Eric Gardner in New York City. They still didn't do anything on that one. Alton Sterling in Louisiana, your home state, that was on video. They didn't do anything on that. So now they can't tell us it takes this long to investigate, because when those 5 black officers here in Memphis, Tennessee, were caught killing Tyre Nichols, they moved swiftly, and we
Yeah,
want
I
it
mean,
to be
this really
swift
does
action
seem to be
on
the
any
fastest
police
that
officer, whether white or black, who kill our people.
a police department has ever moved on punishing their
Benjamin
officers.
Crumb, thank you
Probably
for
because
appearing. I
the
know it's been a
officers
long
are
day
black.
for you, and I hope the mother and the dad are at least getting some rest right now. We appreciate you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, and thank you for the interview
I mean,
this
obviously
morning, Don.
the camera footage is incredibly damning, right? But this didn't happen as quickly with George Floyd when we had that video. And so my problem with this is like, yes, I guess we should look at this as, okay, well, now every other police department across the country needs to look at this as the role model, right? If your police officers kill an unarmed innocent man, they should get in trouble. How about we address the fact that police are killing people in the first place, right? I don't want this to be okay, well, now we've got an example that's been set of how police departments should handle when their officers murder a civilian. And it's like, yeah, but why don't we just not get murdered in the first place? How about that? Right? I mean, if you look at this situation too, this is the problem. This is why, like, people who are on the side of defund the police and or abolish the police get very frustrated with the conversation around police reforms, because a lot of the reforms that have been implemented are ones that were in this situation, right? Having more police officers at the scene, having more black police officers, having tasers, using a taser over a gun, right? a lot of these reforms that have been heralded as like, yay, things are going to change now because we've got these great reforms. These were present during this situation, and look at how it turned out. You know? And it's like, I think the fact that we still have not gotten rid of qualified immunity is a start, right? It's like, you know, this is what is so frustrating about a situation like this, and a situation like the mass shootings that happened in California and have happened every day plus some this year, is, you know, especially when there's video footage that accompanies it, we get so upset and angry, and there's a small window that we have that people are willing to, like, yeah, let's do something about this, right? I can't turn my head away because I saw this violence with my own eyes, and this is sickening, and let's change, let's do something. And then nothing changes, right? Like, this has been a century now of police killing Black men. This has been since Columbine and more, that people have been able to buy assault weapons and murder a bunch of people in seconds. Like, this just continues to happen. And it's because we're not actually taking serious steps to make sure this shit stops happening. And going back to qualified immunity, that is one thing that we could do that would actually have a bigger impact than, like, have more Black police officers, right? And we still can't do that. We still can't get that done. You know? And every time qualified immunity is talked about, the opponents on the other side, the ones who are like, no, we can't get rid of qualified immunity because then cops will be victims. What's going to protect cops? It's like, well, the thing is that we protect cops. Our governments protect cops. Every time, in the rare instance that a police department is sued, okay, the local government, so the thing that we pay our taxes to, is the one that picks up the tab, right? And that is such a small percentage still of the local government's budget because of how not often the police departments are actually successfully sued. Okay, hold on. This is back.
Over the Mississippi. CNN Sarah Seidner is there for us. Sarah, what are you seeing?
We're seeing an absolute standstill. If you look behind me, you see all these trucks down here. That is behind me, the I-55 bridge, southbound and northbound. Northbound towards St. Louis, southbound towards Jackson, Mississippi. There is a huge section of I-55, the bridge included, that has just been stopped for quite some time. I want to give you a sense of what it looks like and where I am. This is exit 12B, and apropos of what's happening, the National Civil Rights Museum
thank you so much,
is
Gringo.
off of that exit. As you know, this was the place
welcome to the community.
was assassinated here in Memphis. But what you are seeing is what protesters here call resistance. They have been peaceful with their resistance. They are here.
Hogan, we can talk about qualified immunity in a second.
There's Crump Boulevard, not Mr. Crump that you just spoke with, but that's the name of the boulevard there. That exit is 12A. You can see the I-55 south to Jackson, Mississippi sign to give you some sense of exactly where we are. Downtown Memphis is not far. And what we are seeing is people who have, on both sides of I-55, just stop traffic. They have stopped traffic. They are holding signs, justice for Tyre. They are holding signs that police who murder must be put in prison. They must face justice. And, you know, the crowd is here. There are emotions that are high, but they've been nothing less than peaceful. They have just stopped the traffic flow. And part of that is because they want people to see that disruption is part of the way
Thank you,
they're going to
Hogan.
protest, because they are feeling pain and they want people to understand how serious they are about all of what they saw on that videotape. So that's where we are right now, Don. It's been shut down for a while. I will tell you this. I'm going to pull myself away from the crowd just a tad. I will tell you this. We have heard one person. You're hearing them chant something that we have heard across the country, from Michael Brown to George Floyd
Reconstruction.
to
Thank you
Freddie
for the
Gray.
tier one.
Whose streets? Our streets. That is what they're chanting, because they feel like these are their streets. They are taxpayers too, and there is no reason why these 5 officers should have been involved in taking the life of a resident here in Memphis. We don't know how long they'll be here, but they are chanting no justice, no peace, something we have heard for many, many decades here. And
Yeah,
honestly,
Jaina,
you know, the
that
police
is-
are on
yeah,
either
that is
side.
very
They have
frustrating.
stopped traffic and have been telling people to go around. There was concern from one person, one motorist, that was frustrated, saying, if there is a medical emergency, I hope you guys are going to be willing to open this up, because you don't want another person to lose their life because of this. But for right now, it is shut down both ways, I-55 here at 12, exit 12A. Don.
All right, Sarah Seidner out in protest on I-55 right now. The city of Memphis, very pivotal when it comes to the civil rights movement. And
Yes,
perhaps
Gerard,
now
they are
pivotal when it comes
There
to
are 5
police
officers who
reform.
have been
Back with our
indicted
special coverage on AC360
for multiple counts,
on
including
CNN in
second-degree
just moments. So
murder.
go
They are
anywhere.
all currently out on bail. But they will
If
be
you have
prosecuted.
this, consider adding
So
this.
something else that really pisses me off is every time we're faced with a situation like this, another black man is killed at the hands of our police. Every time this happens, the first thing that you know a lot of our leaders are going to do, and I get it, maybe it's for optics, is to plead with the public for peace, for peace, right? You know, an emphasis on, I know you're angry, but we need to come together, and we need to be peaceful about this. And you know what? No justice, no peace. And when we say no justice, we don't mean that there's not justice in this specific instance where these cops are being indicted very swiftly. Yes, that is justice. We mean justice in the larger picture, right? That this was able to happen in the first place. And this is something that, like, I have pushed back on a lot of my center neo-lib type family members when, especially in 2020, all the riots were happening, right? And all the fear mongering and whatnot. And I was like, you know what? Until our police stop killing black men in this country, then you cannot and should not expect people to react in a peaceful way, right? Why should they? Why should people, particularly young black men who are mostly the victims of the police institution, why should they go out and express themselves peacefully when the fucking police don't? And when we're not actually doing anything seriously, reform-wise, to ensure that this stops. You know, and I think because these police officers are being held accountable and it happened so quickly. I think the idea is like, okay, y'all, so you have no reason to get crazy again like y'all did in 2020. Okay? Like, please, we're doing what we're supposed to do, so chill. Like, no.
Cobb.
You want to know the crazy thing too is that in 2020 there were obviously so many eyes that were on the institution of police, and you know, it was constantly in the conversation: police brutality, defund the police, blah 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 blah. And in 2022 the police killed more people than they had in recent years, right? Even with the so-called reforms that were put in place, it's not enough. It's just not the way it's being done.
But now that we've seen the video, we see there were a lot of other people, officers, law enforcement, standing around there as well. So from a legal perspective, what do you think it took to be
Thank you for the
one
5
of
months.
those 5, as opposed to the others who, at least as of now, have not been charged?
You're right. Many of us were sort of counting and watching the video and saying, well, wait, there's 5, there's 6, there's 7, there's 8. There's people who are surrounding someone who's going home, wishing the officers well at one point in time. I think what the prosecutors may have been looking at was those that had the direct involvement in the physical assaults, would have been aware about his deteriorating condition, and would have acted in spite of it. You see, they've charged them with knowing killing, which means that they had to believe and appreciate that the actions that they were taking might lead to somebody's death or certainly grave bodily harm. And so focusing on the officers who were restraining the individual, Mr. Nichols, focusing on the officers who were delivering the blows, who were delivering the baton beatings and beyond, and would have been aware of the deterioration from start to finish, is likely the focus. Also, you may have heard the officers, John, at different points communicating with people, communicating with either the paramedics or beyond, or talking amongst themselves, I suspect because they were aware they were being filmed and there was body cam footage, talking about whether he, in fact, was high on something, they kept saying. There was some reason he must have been so strong.
Update on those 2 other officers.
There's reasons to convey that somehow there was some external factor that was contributing to his flight as opposed to his desire to preserve his own life. And so all of those factors is likely what the officers were looking at the prosecutor to say, these are the officers whose behavior was knowing, in some way coordinated, and responsible for the ultimate death.
One of the charges
suspended with pay
that didn't raise eyebrows, but was notable to a lot of legal experts, well, 2 charges, the kidnapping charges. Some people consider that to be relatively novel.
There's really nothing
legal
to investigate.
Here. What it suggests
the
is there is a moment
footage shows you all
when a detention by police officers may go from lawful to unlawful. They are being unlawfully detained. Now that we've all seen the video, Laura, is there a specific moment you can see where prosecutors will say, okay, this is where it's now kidnapping?
Well, think about kidnapping in terms of false imprisonment, as in you are detaining somebody who you have no right to detain. The second they realize there's no probable cause to arrest and or stop and pursue is the delineation point in which the lawful custody has now ended and the restraint then begins. That's probably the range of time, but there are different moments to which the officers were going to point in the defense about this issue. But think about in terms of false imprisonment, not the abducting of somebody and carrying.
What about the cops that did the initial traffic stop? Yeah, if you watch this footage, you realize that there are many more people who were involved in this, who were not, even if they weren't throwing the punches or kicking the kicks, they were involved and they had no problem with seeing Tyre be beaten to death. Right? And so this is why, like, we can't look at this situation. You can't look at this situation as a bad apple situation, you know, for other reasons too. But how many apples are bad apples, right? You have the 5 who actually who have been indicted on murder. But then you had multiple EMTs and firefighters and other cops. There were so many fucking people. There were so many people involved in this situation for one black man who was pulled over as a traffic stop. What? And this is what I mean by like, what is going on here? There are so many other questions that need to be asked and answered, because this is just a symptom of the Memphis Police Department, which is just, you know, a one example of police departments across the country. Yes, the EMTs have been suspended too. So here's the thing, right? Like, I obviously because of the seriousness of the footage and just the undeniability of the pure violence that was enacted for no reason, the officers were indicted, but they're gonna have to deal with everyone else in that footage, or it is going to be a huge problem, right? They're trying to turn this not into a race thing, which is stupid, right? But it will absolutely become a race thing if they don't hold accountable all of the white people who were also involved in this situation. You know, the fact that they moved so swiftly on the black police officers, which is good, which they should have done, but they are going to need to make sure that every person who was involved in this is held accountable. Okay, so oh, damn, these ads. CNN. They must be hurting for money. That's why they got Don Lemon on the ground. I come from a small town, and the discussions around this with some extended family members and acquaintances has been horrible. You know, the thing about that's why, like, I am not completely against footage of something like this being released publicly. I understand that for black people, this is re-traumatizing them, and I don't think that they need to see this because they live this every day. But I do think that there are a lot of us who need to watch this, or whose family members need to watch this and not look away, because there's a difference with not watching something because that is your lived experience, and then not watching something because you don't want to confront it, right? And I think that there are still a lot of white Americans in this country who do not want to confront the reality that our police institutions are racist as fuck. All right, we're back with Dom.
With murder in connection with Tyre Nichols'
Am I
fatal
feeling better?
encounter
Yes,
with police.
I am.
So with me now is Steve Mulroy. He's the Shelby County District Attorney, whose department is prosecuting these 5 cops. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Mulroy. Can you talk to us your reaction to these 2 sheriff's deputies now?
Well, I can't really speak about those kinds of details because there's an ongoing investigation and there's a pending prosecution. You know, we know that there were 2 deputies that came on the scene afterwards, and they have been relieved of duty pending an administrative investigation by the Sheriff's Department. It's important to note that administrative investigation is entirely separate from any investigation that we're doing with the District Attorney's Office.
So why is the sheriff now just reviewing the videotape? The statement says that Sheriff Floyd Bonner Jr. said that having watched the videotape for the first time tonight, I have concerns about the 2 deputies who appeared on the scene following the physical confrontation between police and Tyre Nichols. I've launched an internal investigation. Are members of the police department just seeing this video now in the sheriff's department?
Well, so he is the elected sheriff of Shelby County, which is a county office. He's separate from the Memphis Police Department. And yes, you are correct, Don. The sheriff himself and the sheriff's department people, the county folks, were not shown that video that the MPD had, the Memphis Police Department had.
Okay. Now that this video has been released, your reaction to when you first saw the video and this encounter with Tyre Nichols?
When I first saw this video, which of course was quite some time ago, or several weeks ago anyway, my reaction was heartbreak. I was just heartbroken for what happened to Tyre Nichols, and my thoughts immediately went to the family of Tyre Nichols, and of course I imagine what it would be like if they had to watch the video themselves.
Each of these former police officers has been charged with, among other charges, aggravated kidnapping, aggravated assault, second-degree murder. So how did you arrive at those specific charges? If you look at the videotape,
being Tyre's mom and having to watch that footage,
you feel that you can prosecute on those specific charges?
Hearing him call out for her
Well,
is,
again, without
nobody should ever have to hear
characterize
that.
the video when there's a pending prosecution, I can just say this. Second-degree murder in Tennessee requires a knowing killing, and a knowing killing means, at a minimum, that the
She
defendant
said she won't watch it. Yeah, that's
knew
good.
that
Okay.
the result of death was
I
reasonably
wasn't sure if
certain.
she had watched some
And
of
we
it.
believe that both the video and the evidence as a whole will show that the defendants had to have known at least that it was reasonably certain that what they were doing would cause death. And although the video indicates that each person acted
Like,
in
I don't
a
think
somewhat
that she
different
would.
way, they nonetheless
I don't think
were
you
acting
ever come back
together,
from
and I believe
that.
all of their actions contributed to the death of Tyre Nichols, which is why we're charging all of them with the same charges. I think aggravated
A
assault
guest
is
on
pretty,
Tucker Carlson blamed the
obvious.
mom for what happened.
The kidnapping charge is just the fact that I think, as you know,
Okay,
Laura
what
Coates
the
was
hell's going
describing
over
to
there
you
on
earlier,
Fox News?
regardless of whatever position you take about whether the initial stop was legal, there came a point at which this was an unlawful detention. That unlawful detention was false imprisonment. It was confinement without authorization of law, which restricted someone's liberty. And it became aggravated kidnapping once bodily injury occurred, and also given the fact that they had deadly weapons on
She
them.
stopped watching after she heard them say, "What did I do?" Yeah, good.
Your friends are helping you renovate.
You know, just go back to talking about M&Ms.
A man when he's on the ground, handcuffed. Decent people oppose that. Virtually all Americans oppose that. We should also remember that we don't know all the facts here. We've seen a lot of videos over the years.
I'm just going to pause this real quick because obviously, of course, Fox News wouldn't include a trigger warning. Let me look at.
And put to uses that had nothing to do with the topic.
It looks like they are
destinations in the world.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, of course, Fox News is going to Fox News, not surprised, but I do want to watch this just to refute in case there is anybody who's like, I mean, I don't understand why people are saying that there is a racial bias here. So I'm just trying to figure out how fucking much of this video. Okay. So, okay, there's like 2 seconds of them putting Tyre on the ground, just in case you don't want to watch it, but I think that's all it shows.
Americans oppose that. We should also remember that we don't know all the facts here. We've seen a lot of videos over the years that have been put to uses that had nothing to do with the topic of the video itself. So we should suspend some level of judgment, but that video is awful in a lot of ways. But here's what it's not.
Oh.
It's not an example of racism, systemic or otherwise. The man on the ground who was killed or died in any case was black, but so was every police officer
who was
you
killed
just
or
saw
died
hitting
in
him.
any case.
So, by the way, is the police chief of Memphis. So is most of its city government. So also is the overwhelming majority of the city of Memphis itself. So whatever you think of them, white people did not play any role in this particular tragedy. Whatever the story may be about, it's not about racial bias.
Did he just say white people didn't play any role in this?
Any honest person could see that immediately. But you would never know it from watching the so-called news coverage of this tape today.
Also, like, who is doing their graphics? I'm sorry. Okay, I just want to point that out very fast. Bracing for Violence, these graphics look like they were made by a 13-year-old using his mom's computer. Okay, so real quick. Of course he's lying, right? Like, this is not a shock. When he says white people were not involved, yes, they were, right? There were, if you watch the footage, there were white people who were involved, from the white police officers to the white EMTs to the white firefighters, okay? There were white people involved.
The only person whose race most media outlets identified was the victim. Another unarmed black man murdered by the police, they said.
Yeah.
Moments ago on MSNBC, they just described what you just saw as white supremacy. Really, how? CNN's Van Jones did acknowledge that the police who hit Tyre Nichols were black, but, quote, they might still have been driven by racism. Van Jones didn't take the time to explain how. It was a lie, of course. They're all lying. And Joe Biden himself, the president of the United States, swiftly reinforced that lie, referring to an event in which every single participant and their supervisors was the same color.
That is just
Biden
not true.
lectured the
also.
United States that, quote, fatal encounters with law enforcement have disparately impacted black and brown people. So the one thing we know, no matter how you feel about the video, and most people don't think that's right, but the one thing we know for sure is that there is a highly aggressive propaganda campaign underway tonight designed to manipulate you and using the sad death of a young man in Memphis to do it. That propaganda campaign, like all propaganda...
Dude, this is like the crux of the argument that has been used on the right to not only dismiss this situation as another example of the racial bias that exists within our police and our police institutions, but as I mentioned earlier, to also dismiss like the same thread of stupid thinking is used on the mass shootings that happened this week, where an elderly Asian man targeted elderly Asian people, and they're like, oh, it cancels out, right? If it's the same race of person who does it, then it doesn't, then it's fine. Like this is not the situation, you know, this is not a situation where you can use your little argument. It's just not true. And like any sane person, any reasonably thinking person knows that anybody can be racist. It does not matter if you are the same race as the people you're racist against. Like Candace Owens is a great example. And of course they would never look at Candace Owens as racist because she's one of them. Chanel Ryan with ONN. Kanye West. Right? Like this is not a difficult thing. Some of the worst racism I've ever seen done against Asians is often from Asians because of internalized racism. Right? Like it's always when something horrific happens to an Asian person, you know, there's a video where they're they're being mocked or whatnot, there's always some fucking Asian person in the comments being like, hey, as an Asian person, I don't find this offensive, okay? And if you find this offensive, you're a pussy. Right? Like this is not an uncommon thing. But of course, this is the argument that they take because it is in their interest to protect this institution, right? Because this institution, the police institution, protects them. That is what it was created for.
Propaganda campaigns is by definition dishonest. But it's more than that. It's worse than that. This is yet another attempt by our leaders of our country to inflame racial hatred in the United States. Why would anyone ever do that? The consequences of doing that ripple through the generations. They don't go away quickly, but they're doing it anyway. Why? We can't say for certain, but we can't help but notice that the last time we had race riots in this country, an incumbent president, lost re-election. There was a point. So Joe Biden, if he weren't senile, might be concerned by this. But whatever the intent of lying about what you just saw.
They always love to throw in that little jab, right? Whenever they're talking about Biden, they're like, but Biden, if he wasn't an old senile fuck, they do this every time. Anyway, that's enough. I don't really need to see any more to hear what they're trying to say. You know, if the situation were reversed and police officers disproportionately targeted white men, right? And we constantly saw video footage of white men being ripped out of their cars, being beaten to death, right? I think people like Tucker Carlson would be whistling a different tune. It's just, this is a debate that feels so hard to move the goalposts on. And again, similar to the debate that comes every time a mass shooting happens, but also different because a large majority of Americans do believe in extended gun control legislation. Like this is not an issue that is a hot button, like split 50-50. A majority of Americans believe in enacting extensive gun control legislation. But on the subject of how do we fix our police institutions, within that, it's a little bit trickier because you've got people all the way to the left who believe in abolition, right? They're like, we've tried reforming. It doesn't work. Defunding, that's not enough. We need to abolish and rebuild. So you've got that side, and then you've got the defund the police side, which there is overlap with defund and abolish. And then you have the we need reform side, right? And then you have the people who are on the other side of things where they go, we need to give more money to the police. That we need more police officers and more money. And so there's less coherence, there's less agreement amongst Americans on how do we tackle this problem. But like I said, the similarity that this issue shares with the gun control issue, is that there's always a small window when I think people are willing to listen and people are willing to like be down for meaningful action if we can reach them before it's too late. I mean, after after George Floyd and just the surge of energy that we felt in this country, all of the protests that people were partaking in, the conversations that people were having, it felt like that was the time that serious, meaningful change was going to happen. And then, like I said, police killed even more people in 2022. Even with the glossy reforms that were instituted. And the problem now is that we've reached a point where people who are center or even a little left of center, but are not full, like, yeah, defund or abolish, they think now that the solution is we need more police officers to combat crime. And when they see a situation like that, they go, that's terrible, but that is a unique situation, right? And we need to not pretend otherwise. And this is like I said, this is a conversation that I have with a lot of people in my family who in 2020, it's the same thing. They were like, yes, we need to change this shit. This is terrible. I think it was the first time that a lot of people were confronted with just how cruelly racist the police are. Great. Hold on. God damn it. Thanks, mods. I move very slowly in trying to fix that shit. See, I always lose my train of thought when that happens.
Of these sheriff's deputies being there. When you look at the video, Don, you could see the number of law enforcement officials that show up, don't intervene, don't help Tyre Nichols as he's laying there beaten.
How can it be unique when we see it happen so much? Right. I mean, it's not unique, but I think people just don't want to see it as part of the norm rather than an exception.
20 days later, they themselves are now launching an investigation.
Jesus, you go get water for 1 second.
So
you can't get any water.
In this town, it seems that is yet unknown, I feel like, in this county by officials about their personnel who are on scene. A lot of the information perhaps not being shared. So still many more, it would seem, investigations that need to take place so that we could figure out exactly everything.
Yeah, it's unique because the evidence is public.
These two members of the Shelby County Sheriff's Department, and then also you have the 5 officers, of course, and the 2 people who were involved from the fire department. So, and according to the DA, this could grow. He said nothing precludes an escalation.
And there's a DOJ investigation. What will that bring? And if they start really digging into this police department, we're going to see a lot more stuff.
We'll be following. John, the video has just been released, so it could be the beginning of it for some people who are involved. As you know now, it is a beginning for at least 2 sheriff's deputies whose superior had not seen the video and has now put them on administrative leave.
Yeah, Don, I want to pick up right there. John Miller is back with us, Joey Jackson, Charles Ramsey as well, also with us, CNN senior law enforcement analyst and former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, also CNN chief medical correspondent Dr. Sanjay Gupta. John Miller, first to you, just what they were talking about right there. These 2 sheriff's deputies put on leave now after the video is released. Shimon and Dom were both asking, well, why would that happen? You've got some possible answers.
Well, I'll tell you exactly why that would happen, because the story almost tells itself. You've got the elected sheriff of Shelby County watching on our air or some other show this video play and realizes for the first time watching this video on live television that 2 deputy sheriffs from his agency are there on the scene. That triggers a bunch of questions, which is, what were they doing there on the scene? When did they get there? What part of this did they see, witness, take part in, stand by for? Do they have an implication in this failure to intervene question? But more than any of that, John, is Why am I finding out about this by watching it on live television? They should have told their supervisor, hey, that thing that everybody's talking about, we were there. We heard it on the radio. We rolled up his backup, whatever. But that should have gone from their sergeant to their lieutenant to the senior deputy to the sheriff himself. And
the fact that people are so disgusting, the chat's go to one day follow mode is crazy.
We're going to go through an entire
Yeah, I mean,
inquiry.
that's pretty par for the course.
When did you see it? What did you do? What did you not do?
We're talking anything
and
political.
They're not going to be back on patrol till he's comfortable with all those answers.
You know, Chief Ramsey, if we can expand this a little bit, now 2 suspended sheriff's deputies, the 5 officers charged with, among other things, former officers charged with murder, 2, I think, EMTs on some kind of leave here. As you have now seen the video, how much bigger do you think this web will extend over the next few days? Because there are a lot of other people, law enforcement, in this video.
Well, I don't know how far it's going to extend in terms of criminal charges, but certainly administrative charges for failing to take any action. And I do believe that'll be the next phase internally within the police department. You know, you have to watch that video several times. Every time I see it, it seems like it gets worse every time you see it. But you also pick up different things that different people are doing. And that's what they're doing now. You have to really take your time and go through the tape to really determine who was there, what did they do, or more importantly, what did they fail to do.
You want to know one part
and then,
that is,
you know, take the appropriate action, whether that be criminal.
that is just unbelievable. One of the fucking pigs who's beaten the fuck out of Tyre goes to pepper spray him and pepper sprays himself and another cop. Yep.
Like you were for decades, says
literally sprays himself
says,
and one of the other cops.
Ugly incident. I just watched it with a room full of appalled, baffled cops. Again, this is coming from
and this
people
happened
in
multiple
the business
times
right now,
FYI,
who almost can't believe what they've seen. Your reaction to that?
Multiple times.
Yeah, John. I mean, there's 800,000 sworn law enforcement officers in this country.
And these motherfuckers are part of a special unit? Why? They can't even properly pepper spray? And they're part of a special crime unit?
Vicious savagery. You're seeing things on this video that are not taught in any police academy in this country. And so it is. It's as a member of the law enforcement community, it's disgusting. It's embarrassing, and it really drags the entire community down. But I think it also speaks loudly to this question of an undercurrent of toxic culture in our community, in the law enforcement community, that leads to situations like this. You know, you can see from the absolute first minute of that video, the response at the traffic stop.
This is what I was talking about.
Officers bailing out of their cars at 100% intensity.
That's what I'm talking about.
Screaming profanities, guns drawn, racing up to the vehicle before they really have any legitimate way of understanding what they're facing. It's impossible to imagine that whatever led up to this traffic stop could have provoked a response of that nature. And at that point, it's game on. There's absolutely no restraint at any level. It's horrific. So I understand why you're getting those texts. I'm getting the same ones.
You know, Joey, Andrew just brought up
B.
the
Mac
first
Tara,
video.
that's
The
terrible
first
about your
moment we
classmate.
see, the officers are already incredibly revved up there. Tyre Nichols, not so at all. From a legal perspective, again, leaves many of us asking the questions, what on earth happened before this? But from a legal perspective, how much does that matter?
So I think it's troubling for a couple of reasons, right? So legally, the first question you're going to ask is why they stopped him in the first instance. Was this a pretextual stop? Pretextual stop meaning without basis, you're just looking to find something? Or giving the police the benefit of the doubt, was he engaged in this reckless driving that we're speaking of, right? That gives you the ability and basis legally for the stop, but then everything after that has to be legally justified and proper. And then the other question has to be, right, and more for law enforcement personnel, Chief Ramsey, perhaps John, is tactically speaking, right? And I don't even think the experts need to answer that. Is it an appropriate way to engage with someone when you're throwing F-bombs at them? How about, sir, we're stopping you because. May I see your license or registration? We have reason to believe A, B, and C. Get out the car, get out the car,
Right.
get out the car.
So,
So that escalation of it, John, makes it turn right from the outset into an encounter which is not only dangerous, but of course ends up to be deadly. So I think we're going to see an examination of all that, the predicate for the stop, whether it was lawful and legitimate, what was the encounter like, could the encounter have been different, what the actions that were taken by the police with respect to getting him out of the car, was that necessary, with regard to the force used to get him onto the ground, with regard to the force used in the initial encounter, et cetera. So we're going to see all of that play out, but I think there's one thing which everyone's agreeing upon, is that this did not need to happen. Mr. Nichols should still be alive, and that the tactics and approach of these police officers was patently deplorable.
Sanjay, thank you for your patience.
So
I've
you
waited
guys, this is why whenever anyone's like, I just don't understand what you think race has to do with it. Black men, especially in a city like Memphis, are disproportionately met with violence. They are disproportionately pulled over, first of all, and then met with violence by the police who pull them over. They're like 6 times more likely to be treated violently. Right? So that's why, you wonder if this were a young white man who was pulled over, would this have been the reaction? I don't fucking think so. Mm-mm.
So this was one of the more troubling parts of the whole thing. It's all so troubling, but I looked at this very carefully and sort of marked the time, because there's a time code in this video, and the last time that Mr. Nichols is assaulted, is kicked, is around 8:33. It is not till 8:41 that we see I think it looks like a fire truck, EMS vehicle pull up, but nothing happens till 8:55, where someone actually assesses Mr. Nichols. So at that point, nearly 23 minutes has passed, and it's another 7 or 8 minutes before they actually bring out a gurney. So there's about a half an hour, John, roughly, where you have somebody who is critically ill. We know now that he was, had all these various injuries, and he's really not getting any medical care at all at that point. And that was obviously concerning. But when you watch the beating, the assault, I watched this with some other medical examiners from around the country and have been talking to colleagues all night about this. And there's just so many mechanisms of injury that he seems to have suffered here. A lot of people pay attention to the head injuries. He was kicked in the head. He was punched in the face and the head several times. He seemed to be coming in and out of consciousness when he was leaned up against that vehicle.
Is this the video?
Which could
No.
be, we don't know for sure, could be a
there's
sign
there's
that he
4
was starting to
different
develop brain swelling. The brain is the only organ in the
4
body
different
that when
videos
it
that
swells,
were
it has nowhere to
released.
really go because of the skull. And that's why people will start to develop a loss of consciousness and ultimately can lead to death. But he's also this very thin guy, and he was getting kicked in the torso and in the abdomen and in the chest.
Yeah, this
You
is
can
what
develop
was
bleeding
this is what was so
in the chest as well.
extra
intrathoracic.
pathetic about
so
it.
there's all these potential mechanisms.
Like I said,
when you're face down, you can have a component of obstructing the airway.
Like I said, Tyre was a skinny man, right? He had a slight frame. And not only was he massively overpowered by just the sheer amount of police officers who were attacking him, these were big guys. These were burly, big guys. And they were breathless. Watching the footage and hearing them be breathless and like sharing water because of how much energy they were exerting.
That sort of assault, that sort of beating.
And then that gap of time, Sanjay, I don't know if there's any way of knowing, but the 30 minutes or 20 minutes, depending on how you measure it, based on the injuries that we know he may have had, what kind of a difference could earlier treatment have made?
We don't know. You're right, John. It's tough to say, but he should have been in a hospital.
he should have been taken to a hospital right away. That is what we do in hospitals. We take care of patients with horrific injuries, and that would have been his best chance. Again, I don't want to speculate that it would have somehow, definitively changed the outcome here, but because these were terrible, terrible injuries. But reducing pressure on the brain, making sure that the brain does not continue to swell, addressing bleeding, replacing blood. That is what you do in a trauma hospital, and that's where he should have been.
Yeah, it's a great point there. You don't need to speculate to know that he should have been in a hospital. All right, Sanjay, everyone stand by again, if you will. Next, back to Memphis. Dawn is going to be joined by a Memphis City Councilwoman about what her community is going through.
Yeah, so here's what happened with the EMTs, y'all. So basically, the 5 cops who were indicted beat the fuck out of him. They have him handcuffed. He's leaning up against one of the cop cars. About 5-ish minutes later, the EMTs show up, and the EMTs are standing around with the cops, seemingly having such just casual conversation as they're looking down at him. Okay. They're looking down at Tyre, who is bloody, who has been beaten, who is slipping in and out of consciousness, who is like flopping back and forth. And they're just watching him. And occasionally they would bend down. Like one of them would bend down. There'd be a flashlight, shit like that. This goes on for 25 plus minutes. And I told you, at one point, all of these people, all of them, the cops, the EMTs, the firefighters, everyone who was on the scene, which was a lot of people, they all walk away at one point, leaving him there because of how physically destroyed he was, that they knew he wasn't going to go anywhere, right? And still, they took their sweet time bringing him to a hospital. And they decided not to bring him to the hospital that has a trauma 1 level, right? There were just so many decisions that were made that point to the fact that they wanted him to die. They knew he needed help. And they still chose to wait almost half an hour before finally they loaded him onto an ambulance, and then they took him to a different hospital, the one that did not have a level 1 trauma unit. Yeah. Bet they took the long way. Probably. As opposed to the other day, I saw traffic was stopped, okay? Traffic was stopped in LA because a fire truck had its lights on and was coming down the street. So, sometimes it can be a little dangerous to try to stop in traffic if you're just not in a good place, but you're gotta stop. It's a fire truck. That thing goes by. There was a white lady bouncing a white child on her knee in the passenger seat of the fire truck. They were going for a joyride. Meanwhile, we're all in an intersection, having come to what could have been a potentially dangerous stop to allow this fire truck to get to where it needed to be because we thought someone's life needed to be saved. And I see this thing go by, and it's a white lady with blonde hair and her little blonde white child that she's like, oh, look at. Oh, over there. Yeah, thank you. I'm so glad this is what my tax dollars are going to.
Releasing videos of a deadly police beating of Tyre Nichols. A really tough night. I'm joined now by Memphis City Councilwoman Patrice Robinson. Councilwoman, we're so grateful that you're here to help us get through this and talk about what's on this horrible video. It was released earlier so that you could see it. You saw it at noon today, correct? Yes, I did.
Yeah, maybe that baby saved someone's life. I don't know.
To see,
he was not a baby. He was 5.
What's your reaction?
I was saddened, but I knew it was going to be difficult because I am
It was a kid.
mother and I have a son. And my heart went out to the family and the community and all the families that have lost loved ones to policing that's not favorable. I'm just exasperated, and that is the truth.
What is that? It was a big gasp. What was that for?
This has really been tough for us as a city, for me personally. This has been tough for our community, and I'm getting messages from all over the United States and Canada. I have people reaching out saying, do we need to come to Memphis to help? What can we do? Do we need to march? What can we do to help? And then I have other messages that say that they're not coming to visit Memphis anymore. And I don't want people to give up on us because we had this one snafu. I do believe that we have good people right here in Memphis. We have some great police officers, but the ones that I observed on today are questionable.
So then what needs to happen? Because you're in government. You're an elected official. It's gonna
one
take
snafu,
legislation in
no.
order to change things. So then what needs to happen to make sure that when people are stopped for things like a traffic violation, that it doesn't end in death?
The first thing that we saw was we have no reason to know why they even stopped him. We watched the video from the camera within the
this is a
vehicle,
congresswoman or
and
councilwoman.
They pulled him over. We couldn't tell why.
She's a
they even pulled him
councilwoman.
over.
Yeah,
But my
that's why she's
concern
doing
is
prop
when
for
you're
cops.
stopped for, if that's what actually happened, if you're stopped for any violation for driving.
Put on the fucking put on people who are actually like boots on the ground activists, right? This is what really frustrates me when mainstream media does coverage. They never, ever, ever, ever talk to actual activists on the ground who this is their life's work, right? No.
The police department is saying it's the unit is not the problem. They need the unit in order to fight crime. It's the officers. Do you agree with that?
First of all, we have the information that the Scorpion unit was just a unit to help in particular areas. However, we have several other organizations. It might be the name of it that may need to change, but the function of it may need to be the same. But we don't know that until we get in and investigate. And I know that if we don't start measuring what we have in our community, especially with police, when they make mistakes, when they don't do their job, when they don't follow the rules, we need to know that as a community. And I'd love to see, as a legislator, a report card on the police.
Let's
and what's
change
going
the
on
name?
within, not just the numbers. See, all we get are the numbers.
Yeah.
We had 300 and some deaths this year. And when I get a report from my district, I find out how many people robbed a bank or how many people stole a car. That's not what I need to know.
Yeah.
The community is demanding that we know what's going on the inside and how does it operate to the benefit of all citizens.
Before I let you go,
Bro.
you were talking about the community.
Why are your constituents paying for a special unit called the Scorpion unit, which you think we just need to change the name? Why are they paying why are their tax dollars going to this? And this unit is pulling over people for a traffic stop. Like, do you not understand why that is also a big problem? Like, what is she talking about?
Lacked all three of those.
Thank you. I know you've been standing out here. I appreciate your patience because
You're
it's
quite
freezing.
welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much,
Got a lot of work to do.
Patrice Robinson.
Yes.
And coming up here, we're more on the scene here in Memphis and the impact this moment could have on the city and the nation. We're back in a moment with our special live coverage.
This week, I'm talking to Samantha Power.
Are you?
Dude, and of course Don Lemon just like eats that shit up. He just eats that shit up. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's hard not to feel It's hard not to feel bittersweet about this situation, knowing that, yes, justice was achieved in one way, I guess. But we need to look at the bigger picture. Who's the next Tyre Nichols, right? This is not the last time that this is going to happen. This probably happened somewhere today, right? And there's just maybe not to this degree, but police using excessive force and excessive violence because they don't face repercussions, and that is how they are trained. You know, the laws in this country protect our police officers. LAPD preparing for possible protests in Los Angeles. Thank God the LAPD's on the case. Like the most murderous police department in the U.S. to the point that they murdered one of their own police officers last year during a training session for how to handle protesters. Yep. LAPD murdered one of their own accidentally during a training session on how to treat protesters. Yeah, that's our police department here. Yeah, don't Google LA sheriff gangs. Yeah, and then the LAPD, you know, I think it's about a third of their use of force is against unhoused people because, you know, that's who really needs to be pummeled and just taken care of. The LAPD costs $8 million a day. $8 million a day. Yeah. Yeah. Do not Google 40% cops. Man. So I just want to take a look at something. That I think is important. You know, in between this conversation that we're having about just about the police institution in this country and police brutality and reform versus defunding, you know, the memory of Tyre Nichols should not be lost in this conversation, and it's really heartbreaking to think that he's, you know, that people look at him in a variety of ways, right? Either he's just another victim at the hands of the police, or he is just somebody who, I don't know, maybe, you know, it was an unfortunate one-off accident, but this is not reflective of anything. Like, however people view the situation, it is always important to look at the victims of police brutality as human beings. And I think that the more that we can see each of these people as individuals, as human beings who had lives, who had, things that they loved to do, then I don't know, maybe it'll make us feel more impassioned to ensure that this never happens to another person ever again. So Tyre was, he was a guy from California. He was a skater. A chill dude. Something like this, or everything about George Floyd, Orlando Castile, Michael Brown, right? Like, these are human beings. I just don't understand how you look at stuff like this and don't want to do anything to make sure that another human being is not murdered at the hands of the police, who we pay money to. We pay these fuckers. I don't want to be paying for young black men to be murdered. Fuck no. It's like, if to borrow an argument that conservatives love to use, it's my money. I'd like to decide where it's being spent. I'm not down with having my money go to an institution that is racist as fuck and serves to protect white people and white capital.
I've been here since 10 o'clock, well, 9:45, and the experience has been a very long wait. It's been very agonizing and very agitating waiting here and having everyone go in front of you, appointments, and you're here stuck. So that was my experience. It was a really bad one, actually. I haven't been here in 5 years, and this is probably the worst time ever.
Man, it's just like, yeah. So this is why I say, like, if you, obviously most of you in here don't need to watch the footage of what happened to Tyre to understand what we're talking about, right? You are not the people who need to see this footage, which is why I'm like, protect yourselves. If you don't want to see this, then don't watch it. You don't need to, right? But there are a lot of people who probably need to see this and need to see everything that comes out. Unfortunately, we don't have proof in every situation of police being bad, but when it's available, like, yeah, people need to see it because you can't look away and pretend like you don't know what's going on, right? Plausible deniability. Because if you watch this stuff, if you watch this type of footage and then you still don't think that we need a total rehaul of our police institution, then something is not right with you. You know? Based on publicly available data, since records began being kept in 2009, what is that, billion? 2.4 billion, 2.2 billion has been paid out in compensation to the survivors and victims of wrongful deaths. Yeah, and the crazy thing is how much more did not get paid out.
It's not adding more
Right?
police. There's something
That
fundamentally
should have been
wrong
paid out.
with the system of policing in this country. And it doesn't matter whether or not you are black or white. The commonality, and I think Van will agree, that goes from Emmett Till all the way to what we saw today, back to George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, all of the names that we can imagine, is that the common theme is that these black folk did not get the benefit of their humanity. And until the police officers and the way that we police our communities, until they start to see young men, young boys, regardless of whether or not they're
Some people are
wayward
enemies
or
of humanity.
regardless of
Yeah.
whether or not they're free spirits or anywhere in between, actual human beings, because the way they treated him today was, or the video we saw, the way they treated him was less than human. The way that the officers beat him, less than human. The way they didn't even care for him, less than human. And the crazy part about this, Van and Don, is I dare say that if it was me or you, we would have got our ass beat the same way. And that, for me, is the problem, because many times, officers, individuals in their uniforms do not see us as human.
Don Lemon's like, no, I wouldn't have. No.
Van,
They would have known I'm Don Lemon.
Bakari mentioned George Floyd,
I would've
Ahmaud
been okay.
Arbery, as he said, all the way from Emmett Till, and then there's Rodney King. Benjamin Crump has been comparing this beating to the 1991 beating of Rodney King. Listen, you were one of the people arrested at the protests, I believe, that followed King's beating.
The police in this country are completely out of control.
Listen, there's a
dangerous
comparison
to everyone.
in that, in
Yeah,
the beating, but I think this one stands on its own and doesn't necessarily.
I think what's important is when we talk about the institution as being racist, right? As being founded to protect the interests of white supremacists. It doesn't mean when we're talking about policing today that nobody outside of black men are victims of the institution. Like, that's just not true, right? Obviously people who are poor, they are targets of the police. They are victims of the police, and that includes races other than black. So I think that just because we are talking about the disproportionate amount that black men are targeted and treated with violence by the police, it doesn't mean that, of course, white people, especially poor white people, are not victims of the police as well. That just speaks to the problem with the police, right? That doesn't take away the fact that the police are bad.
Act like this. I might be in jail next week if I act like this. If that doesn't happen, we're going to see this over and over and over again.
Sorry, I didn't really need to listen to what Van Jones was saying.
Well, you guys know how I feel about you. Thank you so much. I'll see you
brother.
guys soon. There's a lot more straight ahead. We're going to talk to the pastor who will be presiding over Tyre Nichols' funeral.
I could probably
next.
tell
His
you what
thoughts
Van Jones
as
was
we continue
saying.
to process what we have witnessed tonight together. That's coming up.
Oh, Chris Wallace.
I do think so.
Gary Sinise. I'm so tired of CNN trying to portray Van Jones as the voice of the black community. Bro, Van Jones is out here, like, Van Jones is also out here acting as if he is like this savior for the black community. Not just the voice of the black community, but like the goddamn savior. Also, side note, supposedly he was hooking up with Kim Kardashian. Whatever. Okay. Yeah, I mean, listen, just because you have people of color, just because you have black people who are in positions of power, who have managed to defy the odds that exist in this country for a black man to make it as a high up professional in media. It doesn't mean that they are also not upholding the just neo-lib interests of mainstream media. Mr. Drum Machine, thank you for the 5 months. You know, I want to point out that black women are also killed by the police at a tremendous rate. Yes. Okay. This is a good point. When we talk about black men's pain, we talk about black people's pain. Absolutely. And I think, I think Sandra Bland and, Sandra Bland's a great example, right? When that situation happened, that didn't really have eyes on it. And unfortunately, it speaks to an issue that is one that we've started to have conversations about with everything, with Breonna Taylor, but we still need to talk about it more. That black people in general, of course, are so often seen as less than human in this country. Black men, of course, are the ones that we think of when we think of police brutality, but black women are also disproportionately killed by police. And we tend to not talk about those instances like we do if it is a black man who's killed, right? I remember, I can't even remember who said it, but I remember hearing a long time ago a black woman say that black women are the most disrespected people in this country. And it's true, right? They are so often, when we look at problems in this country, black women are so often the ones who are most affected, but they're not included in the conversation, right? Like when we talk about infant mortality rates, or when we talk about maternity rate or mortality rates with women who are giving birth, they disproportionately affect black women because black women's medical claims are not taken as seriously as non-black women. And the same goes with domestic violence, right? Black women are disproportionately affected by domestic violence, but it's something that is just, again, not part of the conversation because black women are so disrespected in this country. Now, you might be sitting there saying, but wait a second, Breonna Taylor, that was a huge thing. It was months and months and months after Breonna Taylor was killed that we heard anything about it. I think people forget that. And then, yeah.
News.
Well, joining us now is Alex Vital, who is author and professor of sociology at Brooklyn College, New York. He's written extensively on US police and community policing. If I may just pick up on that point which Peter Bowes ended his report on, why does this kind of thing keep happening?
Well, I think we've been addressing the problem in the wrong way. I mean, the sad fact is that last year we had a record number of police killings despite several years of discussions and investments and so-called commitments to reforming police. And the local activists there in Memphis have actually switched from calling for yet more training to talking about, well, why are we using police to engage in routine traffic enforcement, to engage in pretextual traffic stops?
Not only using police, but police who, which I've said for the millionth time, who are specifically supposed to be part of a special crime unit to handle dangerous crime in parts of Memphis, in parts of downtown in the city. So not only why are we using police to handle traffic stops, why are we using ones who are part of a special crime unit? Oh, thank you, Admitted Flunky. Appreciate that. Caroline greater than
And
us.
why are we unleashing all kinds of secretive, specialized, highly militarized units on communities to deal with what are often very minor issues?
So it seems to be, you think one solution might be, to take police officers away from routine traffic stop duties?
This is already happening in some cities in the United States. The research shows, including research very near Memphis in Nashville, shows that routine traffic enforcement by armed police does not actually improve traffic safety. Things like engineering, traffic calming measures, speed limits, these things make much more of a difference in improving traffic safety.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in terms of the power dynamics at play here, how much do you think that comes into it?
Well,
Okay, I have a fucking question. Why are we getting this from BBC News? Right? Like, where's this conversation happen? Which is ironic because, of course, Britain is racist as fuck itself. But, like, why am I getting this from BBC? And the same thing, like, I remember thinking when the shooting happened in Monterey Park, the first news publication who broke a story was BBC News. BBC News was the one that I was reading about to see what the fuck happened in Monterey Park. As I'm listening to the police scanners, trying to get any information.
There has been this tremendous uprising of demands for changes in how policing is conducted. And in fact, Memphis adopted a huge number of changes to training, use of force policies, and it just hasn't changed the fundamental way that policing happens there. And I think part of the problem is that local officials have failed to consider other strategies to address some very real crime problems in Memphis, and they put everything on the backs of the police. And this has caused the police to engage in tactics that, frankly, are abusive and racially disparate.
I'm just reading some of the detail of what happened. And officials say he was suspected of reckless driving, but the account says he'd simply stopped to take photos of a sunset at a local park. How does that kind of thing escalate?
So this is what we call
welcome to America.
Stop. The stop was not because there was an actual traffic safety problem. The stop was conducted because the police, who were part of one of these secretive special units called the Scorpion Unit, were there on a fishing expedition hoping to find drugs, weapons, other kinds of illegal behavior, but really without any probable cause. And then they grossly escalated the situation. And this is part of the problem. If the police were not engaged in these fishing expeditions, often in the service of a completely pointless war on drugs, then these kinds of escalations wouldn't occur.
Another point I want to raise, and it is one that is often at the heart of unrest following these cases, is the skin colour of the victim. And he was black. In this case, so were the officers. Does that make a difference?
Well, I think Reverend Sharpton's comments in the package before this were really insightful in a sense.
The contrast between their ears.
A tremendous effort was put into diversifying police departments. And in fact, the race of officers in the United States is now pretty close to the race of the population. And it just hasn't made any meaningful difference.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone in very poor non-white communities in the United States feels that the race of the officers is making some kind of meaningful difference in the way that they are experiencing policing.
Mm-hmm.
In which case?
Yeah, I know somebody earlier was like, we need more diverse police officers. No, we just need less police officers. Clearly, obviously diversifying a police force has been one of the big reforms that's been pushed, especially in the last couple years. I don't think you need to look any further than this situation to see, oh, yeah, doesn't matter. One of the police officers who was involved with the brutal murder of George Floyd was Asian.
Case, what would make a difference then?
Well, I think that cities need to look for strategies other than just policing to address their crime and disorder problems. And that really was the key demand of the movement in 2020. And that's the key demand that's coming from activists on the ground in Memphis.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a big thing, right? Yes. The police are frequently out of discipline. Absolutely. So the police do what the police do because they know they will be protected. Okay. This, of course, is a specific instance where justice has been swift, at least for, in indicting these 5 black police officers. But the way that the police are trained and the way that they operate when they go out in the line of duty is under the assumption, and this assumption comes from the way that our laws have been constructed and just the history of protecting police in this country over the interests of civilians. They know that they can use excessive force, that they can do these things, and they will be protected. And even in the case where a lawsuit is brought, okay, and manages to go through, this isn't coming out of their pensions, right? This isn't coming out of the pocket of the police department. This is daddy government who's going to pick up the bill. Yeah. And, as far as police officers being barred from ever being police officers if they did some heinous shit somewhere else, look at what happened in Colorado with the young kid. Hold on. His name is on the tip of Elijah McClain. Yeah, Elijah McClain. One of the officers who killed Elijah McClain, he had been suspended from a different police force that he worked at in another part of Colorado. Okay, back to where did it go?
What does that look like, though?
It looks like investing in new infrastructures of public safety, community-based anti-violence efforts, so-called credible messengers that come from high violence communities that work with young people to try to break that cycle of violence by involving young people in pro-social activities, connecting them with trauma counseling, employment opportunities, et cetera. It's about investing in more counselors in schools, more community-based mental health services, all of which is a lot cheaper than what we're spending on policing and doesn't come with the collateral consequences that unfortunately many of us are going to see on this video when it's released over the next day.
Okay, Alex, I know I've put some very, very tough questions to you. It is an issue that is not easily solved, but really, really interesting to get your thoughts. Alex Vitale, Professor of Sociology at Brooklyn College, New York. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah. I feel like the only person I remember pointing out that one of the cops who held on Floyd was Asian was Hassan Minhaj. Yeah, I mean, it's uncomfortable to confront racism that exists with members of your own race. Like that is a terrible thing that a lot of people have been grappling with in the Asian community when looking at the 2 mass shootings that happened in this past week. And obviously the root issue of those, like every other mass shooting, is the accessibility and the ease of legally obtaining weapons that are designed to kill quickly and efficiently. However, that is a very painful thing to come to terms with, knowing that the 2 people who took all of these lives were themselves Asian and elderly. You know, those are tough conversations to have when confronting racism within members of your own race. To treat all minorities as a monolith that aren't incapable of stepping out on their own out of self-interest is racist in and of itself. Yeah, true. Did you hear about the badge bending scandal in California? Is that where police officers who had been involved with shootings were not, like, wasn't that the situation where they found that like the police departments were not they would bend the points of their badge that they had killed a suspect. Yes. Like, Jesus Christ. Seen as a reason to promote the officer. Yeah, well, good. Great. In Vallejo, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great. I'm afraid, that police need deep mental health intervention even prior to joining. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to separate, it's also hard to separate police officers from domestic abuse. Police officers have the highest rate of domestic abuse. Yep. All right, y'all. So I'm going to run to the bathroom. I think I am. Let's see if I want to look at anything else. I think I want to move on to talking a little bit about what's happening with
Realtor.com. I love this house, but can we even afford it?
Maybe Jacob can finally get a job.
Sorry, I want to look a little bit at what's happening in the aftermath of the mass shootings that happened this week, which unfortunately are not the only ones that happened this week. There are more mass shootings that have occurred this year than there are days in the year. That's America. Love that for us. So I'm going to run to the bathroom. When we come back, I'm going to cover that because I can only stream for about another hour. So I want to make sure that we get into a little bit of that coverage.
I believe where he was taken, probably assessed him. They have the answers to some of these questions. Did he have that sort of brain swelling? Did he have bleeding?
Y'all
in
can
other
watch
parts of his body?
CNN.
Did he have obstruction
fake
of his
news.
airway when he was essentially being knelt upon, face down? They probably have the answer to these questions. But brain swelling and that sort of pattern that we saw where he was lapsing in and out of consciousness, that sort of fits. The injuries, the swelling, and then that sort of loss of consciousness that we saw.
And again, as Don and Shimon were pointing out, Sarah Siner, this was all done to a human being. Sanjay Gupta, thanks so much for being with us.
You got it. Thank you.
Next, our legal and law enforcement team back with us with some thoughts. And later, Don's interview with Tyre Nichols' parents.
What's it like to hear from the people actually living the headlines? I'm Audie Cornish. My new CNN podcast will talk to the people behind the trending stories. I've got a lot of questions.
The Assignment with Audie Cornish. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to Who's Talking. We have two things in common, and I bet you don't know either one of them.
Do I get a hint? I don't think I chose the universe. I think the universe chose me.
Who's Talking to Chris Wallace. Sunday nights at 7 on CNN.
This week, I'm talking to Samantha Power. Are you keeping up with...
Okay, you guys really don't need to watch that ad on Chris Wallace. All right. So, yeah, I think that'll probably wrap up the coverage I'm going to do on Tyre Nichols. Of course, as we're talking about police brutality, this all links into the next topic of conversation, which is what is happening with gun control legislation. I wanted to hear what Samantha Powers was going to say. Oh, darn. Oh, damn. What is happening with gun control legislation with Democrats like Dianne Feinstein and who, all right, at least she's doing something, and Chris Murphy, who are once again pushing for and introducing legislation to ban assault weapons, because the last time we had an assault weapons ban was in 1994, and then it expired in 2004, and it has never been renewed because the Republicans exist to block any meaningful legislation on gun control because it is not in their interests to enact legislation for meaningful gun control. Yeah, so that shit expired and has still never been brought back to the table and renewed. Thanks for being a streamer that covers tough topics. Listen, you're welcome. I think it's something where this is something that I spend so much of my day looking at and wanting to make sure that I'm always aware and educated. And so to be able to stream on Twitch and do a variety of things, from talking about the Oscars to talking about things that are not as fun to talk about, but are very important, like this, is something that I think is very important. So I appreciate you all being very respectful for these conversations. Like I said, if this is not your thing, if you come on Twitch and you, especially with it being a Friday night, you're like, I don't really want to listen to any more coverage on police brutality or gun control. That's fine. Like, that's okay. Go find something, right? Please don't come in here and just be obtuse or be combative, because that's not what we're doing here, right? I prefer not to yell at people, which is why I always say to somebody, if genuinely you are like, I don't want to talk about this, or if you're not with the conversation, that's fine. Just go somewhere else, okay? And if you want to come back when we're doing something else on the stream, come back. Okay, there is one thing, though, with the Oscars that I would like to talk about before I end stream tonight. So if I can get to it, we will get to it, because it concerns the To Leslie campaign. And I actually think it's a good conversation to have because it is inherently political. Anyway. Chat's been great tonight. We've only had 1 to 2 bad apples. Just like the police. Okay, so here we have Mr. Pretty Boy Gavin Newsom speaking in Sacramento following the 2 mass shootings that have happened in California in the last week. Normally, Gavin Newsom kind of rubs me the wrong way. I just think he's a little too politician-y. And, when he usually delivers a speech, it just kind of smells of bullshit. But I actually think this is one of his better speeches.
I headed down. I'm processing all this in real time. I headed down 2 days ago after hearing around Monterey Park, and my first instinct was to get to my desk and open up a file. And literally out dropped the file with a bunch of these yellow cards from my talking points in San Jose, the ones at the Gilroy Garlic Festival, and then the ones literally almost 4 years ago to the week, related to the Thousand Oaks shooting where 13 people were gunned down at the Borderline Bar and Grill. Literally, these are the notes, one of them. I went down to Monterey Park and was invited to 3 press conferences like this, and I said, nope. I watched them on my cell phone instead as I walked around the community. And I'll tell you what, I did that selfishly, because I didn't have the guts to come up and say the same things we hear again and again and again. That was covered. Sheriff Luna did a magnificent job. Local electeds did a magnificent job. We made sure of that as well. But I walked and listened, knocked on doors, just walked into businesses that were still open and just listened to people. Remember someone rolling up, young woman, 3 young girls in the back, and can I talk to you? She starts tearing up. She introduced me to her 10-year-old daughter, 8-year-old daughter, and 3-year-old daughter, and said, can you do me a favor? And can you tell them it's going to be okay? And I said, what do you mean? She goes, well, they're supposed to be in school, but my 8-year-old said, no way. I said, how's her 10-year-old? She goes, doing remarkably. 3-year-old, she was just rolling around in the back. And the 8-year-old was so fearful because she heard the gunshots. And she actually knew they weren't firecrackers. She in and of itself is remarkable. And she didn't sleep the night before. And I looked over at her and I said, it's going to get better. And all I thought to myself, if she was like my 8-year-old daughter, thank God she didn't do this. She didn't ask me to pinky promise. Because I wasn't so sure. Walked back the next morning, met with more merchants, visited the hospitals, met a young man on life support Next morning, I find out he passed away. I met someone in the hospital, and he said, "Hey, Governor, thanks for being here, but when am I getting the hell out of here?" And I said,
Listen, I said he is politician-y, okay? I do think, though, that what he says, like, later in the speech is one of the better speeches, okay? All right?
I said, "Well, let's get the doctor."
He
says, "No, I'm going to be fine." His leg was shattered by the gunfire. He goes, "I can't afford to spend any more time here. I don't have the money." His mom arrived, Cantonese speaking. His only son arrived. And they came over to me worried he's going to lose his job in the warehouse the next day.
Yeah, I feel like he's being real for once.
Joaquin talks about inequality and things being exposed. That's exactly what we experienced here today. Farm workers of all stripes, Latino descent, Asian descent, Asian gunmen. 39 now of these mass shootings, and we're only at day 24 of the new year. I was looking back at these same notes, and it's right here, right up on the right corner. It says Aurora. It goes down to Midland, Orlando, Buffalo, Poway, Parkland, San Jose, Sutherland, Sandy Hook, Boulder. And I started writing in Monterey Park. And now I got to write in Half Moon Bay. What the hell is going on? But it was said, and it's said all the time, only in America. Only in America. #1 in gun ownership, #1 in gun deaths. It's not even complicated. And guess what? This happened on our watch. Society becomes how we behave. We've allowed this to happen. Doesn't have to be this way. It wasn't always this way. A few decades ago, we didn't experience these kind of things. We've allowed this to happen.
Stop complaining and do something. I honestly, listen, I'm no Gavin Newsom apologist, but he has enacted some of actually the most stringent gun control legislation in the country, to the point that the gun laws in California are so strict that we are facing an issue now, because California is not just a solidly blue state, of this being of certain legislation being challenged in the courts. And that's happening right now with the high capacity magazines. So that right now that you are not allowed to possess high capacity magazines over like something like, if it can hold 10 bullets or more, except for if you are grandfathered in, which basically means if you possessed one of these high capacity magazines before the law went into effect in, I think it was in the 80s or in the 90s, if you're grandfathered in, then you get to keep those, right? And the same goes with semi-automatic weapons that have been banned in California. If you're grandfathered in, if you owned them before the law in California went into effect, then you get to keep those. But what's happening is that they have been trying to change that to get rid of the grandfather clause. Oh, 11 rounds. Okay, thank you. They're trying to get rid of the grandfather clause, and that is being challenged in the courts by the conservative politicians in California. So again, in most instances, I am not a Gavin Newsom apologist, but when it comes to gun control legislation, he has been very rigorous about it, to the point that now we're looking at facing a backlash from the conservative politicians here. And the crazy thing is that California has the strictest gun laws in the country, right? But if you compare us to countries like Japan or France or China, ones that we compete with, our gun control laws in California are absolutely nothing. And that is how sick this country is, right? It's like, yeah, you compare California to Tennessee, to Mississippi, to Alabama. Sure, we're super strict, but not when you compare us worldwide. And the problem is that because we live in a country where there are guns galore, right? You can go to New Mexico or Arizona and get whatever you need, especially in Arizona. It's very, very, very hard to cut down on gun violence when you can simply cross the state borders. This is a huge issue. When I was living in Illinois, this was a big, big problem because right across the lake is Indiana. And in Indiana, you can get whatever the fuck gun you want. And so even though when I was working in politics in Illinois, we would fight to enact gun control legislation, and then there's a whole thing happening right now with an assault weapons ban that is being tied up in the Illinois Supreme Court, which is such bullshit. But it almost didn't matter because people would just go across. They would drive 20 minutes and go to Indiana and get a fucking gun.
And I feared 2 days ago that Monterey Park would give way to other headlines. Little did I know I'd be up here to give away 2 or 3 days from now to whatever the headlines will bring. Meanwhile, the trauma and the damage, the devastation is felt for generations in some cases. Communities being torn asunder, no one feeling safe. All those farm workers, can I get a job someplace else? I can't go back. And by the way, some of you should see where these folks are living. The conditions they're in. Living in shipping containers. Living in shipping containers. Folks getting $9 an hour. You want to verify the California minimum wage? Not $9 an hour. No health care, no support, no services. But taking care of our health, providing a service to each and every one of us every single day. So this whole thing is just a stacking of issues that come to the fore. But the one common denominator are these damn guns. Mm-hmm. I got no ideological...
He's right. This is the common denominator in all of these shootings. Just like the common denominator when we look at an instance of police brutality is police, right? Doesn't matter if they're black, doesn't matter if they're Asian. The common denominator in instances of police brutality is the institution of police. The common denominator when talking about mass shootings is guns. It is the accessibility and the ease of that accessibility.
Opposition to someone owning a gun responsibly. But what the hell is wrong with us that we allow these weapons of war and large capacity clips out on the streets and sidewalks? Why have we allowed this culture, this pattern to continue? What happens in every one of these cases, I watch those same evening newscasts you do. Well, we couldn't solve for this with this particular law. We can solve for a pattern. We get so consumed by an incident that we lose sight of the pattern. Mm-hmm. I'm proud of California. Don't think for a second this state has stepped aside. We've taken responsibility. We believe it's decisions, not conditions, that determine our fate and future. We've led the nation. We've led the national conversation in gun safety. No state in America has done more than the state of California. And the data bears out the efficacy, the success of gun safety. Gun safety saves lives, but notably, not in every case. No one's naive. So don't point to that as proof of its failure. Quite the contrary. Gun safety saves lives. The modern gun safety movement started with a guy named Ronald Reagan. The Republican Party should look that guy up. 1967. great leadership here in 1989 with the assault weapons
Ronald
ban,
Reagan
led by
was
Senator
responsible
Feinstein
for
a few years
the war
later
on
after
drugs,
another
but-
tragedy in
okay.
101 California in the 1994 assault weapons ban. That worked. That worked until it expired in 2004, and we started to see an increase in mass shootings. We've led the nation on background checks, closing loopholes. We've led the nation on red flag warnings. We led the nation on waiting periods. We led the nation across a series of gun safety measures, and the data bears it out. We've seen a 55% reduction in gun deaths when we initiated those progressive reforms from 1993 to 2017. And you look at our gun death rate, it's 37% below the national average. Gun safety works. We will not back away from that resolve. But we can't do this alone. And with all due respect, we feel like we are. And this is where, and forgive me, what the hell do I have to lose? Well, you just got to call some folks out.
All right.
I'm still waiting for Kevin McCarthy, the leader of the House of Representatives, who purports to represent the people of the state of California, a proud and remarkable district in Kern County. We haven't heard one damn word from him. Not since Monterey Park, not what happened here, not one word, not one expression of prayers, condolences, nothing.
That's the crazy shit, right? Is that Kevin McCarthy, in the aftermath of these shootings, didn't even tweet out some bullshit thoughts and prayers, right? I think so many of us in the immediate aftermath of this were just, we were bracing for the thoughts and prayers from a lot of politicians, which is par for the course, okay? We didn't even get that. We didn't even get that shit because, I'm telling you, the victims were Asian, the mass shooter was Asian. So they looked at this as we don't have to come in with our thoughts and prayers, okay? First of all, it's just Asian on Asian crime. Second of all, there's no way these people are going to come in with their white terrorist, domestic terrorist bullshit, guns. We don't have to worry about that in this situation. So, you know what? We don't even need to extend the thoughts and prayers. We don't. Yeah, and especially the Half Moon Bay shooting, because those were immigrant farm workers, right? If there are lives that definitely do not matter to Kevin McCarthy, they are immigrant farm worker lives.
And it should surprise nobody. Where's he been on gun safety reform? Where's the Republican Party been on gun safety reform? They blocked it every step of the way.
Yeah, these
One state
motherfuckers
can't do it alone. Shame on them. And shame on those that allow and perpetuate that to be rewarded politically. Shame on them. Shame on these judges that are rolling back the laws that we've established in the state of California. Shame on them. You deserve better. We deserve better. And so I'm here processing, like all of us, the absurdity, the theater, look around, of absurdity, only in America. And I'll close on this. Really hit home to me today, meeting immigrants from China. And their translator didn't even know how to translate these words. When the gunfire occurred, they were witnesses. Their friends got shot, killed. They went over, people had been shot, and they thought they were acting. They'd never heard a sound like that. They'd never seen a scene like that. They didn't even know how to comprehend a gunshot wound. It's not something they ever experienced. They don't even know how to comprehend that. Only in America do we see this kind of carnage, this kind of chaos, this kind of destruction of communities and lives and confidence and a sense of safety and belonging, which we all yearn for, regardless of our political stripes or our lot in life. So thank you to the first responders, the rock stars behind us, the paramedics that were on the scene. We pray for this one individual, and it was because not just of prayers, but a couple of young men behind me, that if he survives, He will have survived because of their extraordinary work. Thank you to that young man, that 26-year-old Brandon and I met yesterday. This remarkable kid whose aunt told me, I can't believe it was Brandon. We all know Brandon. He was so shy. He's such an empath. I remember him, he said, Aunt, when he was a kid, and he would just immediately give all his toys to the rest of the family.
Yeah,
He
this
was
is
just
the
that
type
kid.
of based
And when we
anti-republicanism
learned
that
it
we
was
just
Brandon,
never get.
we were so proud.
You know?
Selfless.
Like, this is specific.
Brandon looked at me. He said, I knew I was going to die. I heard a click. I turned around. I think he was about to shoot me. I didn't know. I literally physically was submitting to that moment. And then something came over to me. And I grabbed that weapon. And I wrestled it away. He's still in shock. He doesn't even understand. We talk about heroes. Sometimes we talk about it a little too much. Kind of loses its resonance. Boy, I met one yesterday. And you know what? If Brandon can do it, we all have that capacity. And so it's in that spirit, Joaquin's spirit, the other electeds that said it. Thank you to the community for not giving up, not giving into the cynicism. Thank you for believing in each other. Thanks for showing up today. You wouldn't be here if you'd given up. Thank you for your resolve. Thank you for knowing in your core, we can figure this out, because we can. We know what to do. It's not even complicated. We do. And we don't have to do this again and again and again. To my state, final words. We were here just a few days ago with Congresswoman and the President. 22 days, 32 trillion gallons of water. Mother Nature's fury unleashed. This community, communities across this state. It's been a hard month and a half. I'm mindful of that. After 2 years of all that stacking of stress with COVID and feeling isolated and disconnected, I'm so proud of California. I'm so proud of all.
Got that weird politician smile. In all honesty, listen, I'm not gonna pretend to be an expert in body language, but I think he is obviously very angry and very frustrated and potentially on the verge of crying. That sometimes this can be a response, right? Like, I do this where when I'm covering something that is so insane and I cannot believe that we're talking about this again. A lot of times that emotion can come out with like, wow, here we are. I just, so I wouldn't necessarily look at his smiling and laughing and Joel Osteen vibes as like him like weirdly finding the situation funny. No, it is an emotional, it is a physical response that people can have to emotions that are that include exasperation and just how the fuck are we here again? Yeah, and that's him processing too, for sure. He said that in the beginning of his speech. God damn, now I've become a Gavin Newsom apologist. Does anyone? Oh, 100%. If there's a movie on Gavin Newsom, Matthew McConaughey is playing Gavin Newsom. Yep. So here's the thing. Okay. Right now, there is, again, legislation to ban assault weapons that is being pushed through to Congress. It is being helmed by Dianne Feinstein and Chris Murphy and one other Democrat whose name I can't remember. This is not the first time, of course, that an assault weapons ban bill is being pushed forward because, again, the last time that we had one was 2004. However, we've gotten to a point in this country that Republicans, one of their purposes in being in office is to uphold the interests of the NRA and gun lobbyists and block any actual meaningful gun control legislation that comes across their path. So, of course, last year, Biden signed a gun safety bill into law, okay? And that was the most meaningful gun safety that we had successfully gotten past in decades, which is not an indication of how great that bill was, but an indication on how piss poor in gun control legislation America is, right? There were many things that were not included in that bill that a lot of gun rights activists were fighting for, and especially politicians who, like Chris Murphy, who have really made it the cornerstone of their work. And one of those things was assault weapons, right? So there was not an assault weapons ban that was included in the gun safety bill that Biden signed last year. However, there were still, things that we didn't have, like expanded background checks for people under the age of 21, not allowing domestic abusers with a history of domestic violence to purchase a gun. Like, there are things that are good, okay. However, it is so seemingly impossible to do this one thing that we've had before, and it has been proven to cut back on the number of deaths, because the math is simple, right? If you ban a gun that has the ability to quickly and efficiently kill as many people as possible in a short amount of time, if you ban that, then the math tells you that you're going to cut down on the number of people who die, right? Weapons, the semi-automatic weapons that are so commonly used in mass shootings, like the AR-15, for instance, the likelihood that somebody who is targeted by one survives is very low. Okay, so this is common sense. You ban this shit, you're going to very simply cut back on the number of people who die in a shooting, right? If you have a gun where you have to shoot and then reload and then shoot and then reload, and it's not something that's using a high capacity magazine, which, shoots very quickly and very efficiently, right? You're just going to have less dead people. Have a great stream. Thanks for the great talk. Oh, thank you for hanging, Merry Melodies. Have a great night. PSA cap. Yeah. Yeah, all the way. All the way. So, okay. And part of the problem is that the NRA, their definition of what makes an assault weapon, and the way that the Supreme Court has made decisions on how do we define what is an assault weapon, and therefore, like, what, when someone is purchasing something and then that is later used in a mass shooting, does that fall under the category of what is commonly defined as an assault weapon? So there's just a lot of like tricky wording and things that the NRA has used for years to try to get around this issue, right? And to try to make sure that semi-automatic weapons are not considered assault weapons and therefore can continue to be legally bought. So here's where we're at right now. Okay. We've had more mass shootings this year than days in the year. Once again, legislation is being pushed through to ban assault weapons. It is not going to be signed into law because, one, we have a narrow majority in the Senate, and two, the Republicans control the House. It's just how it goes. And these evil fucks are protecting their interests and the interests of the lobbyists who pay them lots and lots of money to make sure that they keep making a killing off of people being killed. Because of all of this, the legislation is not going to be signed into bill. However, it's very, very, very important. It is important to do what like Gavin Newsom kind of did in that speech there, which is to make sure that the American people are constantly aware of just who it is who is making sure that the next mass shooting happens and happens at the highest killing that it can, right? To make sure that mass shootings continue, and when they happen, the most amount of people who can die will die. And so those politicians, you know, the Kevin McCarthy's, the lot of them, they need to specifically be called out for blocking this legislation, for being the reason that something that is such common sense and something that once upon a time was a law in this country has been unable to be passed into law since 2004, almost 20 years ago. If they're banned, what do you think will be the policy for people who already own those guns? Okay. So similar to in California, I'm sure that there would be a fight to include a grandfather clause, which means that anybody who owned one of these weapons or one of these magazines, high capacity magazines, anybody who owned them before the law goes into effect is grandfathered in. I think that obviously the best and most sane policy is to get rid of them all. There is no reason why outside of the military, people need access to those weapons and those magazines. There's just literally no reason unless you are looking to kill a lot of people very quickly and very efficiently. Like, that's it. If you're a hunter, okay, let me just say this, right? You're a hunter and you're out here being like, excuse me, I need an AR-15, okay? All right, it's my right to own one. I'm not going out there and doing a mass shooting, okay? I'm going to look at you and say, you know, honey, if you're not able to take down that buck with anything other than an AR-15, I think you need to get a new hobby. I don't think you're a very good hunter. If the only way you can take down that buck is by shooting the ever-living shit out of it with an AR-15, you are a really bad hunter. You need a semi-automatic weapon to take down a deer that's grazing in a field? That's really dumb. Sorry, I don't know anything about hunting. I'm not a hunter, but seems to me like you're not good at hunting. Yeah, I would destroy the meat too. Time for a TED Talk.
I'm going to talk to you about guns, a very uncontentious topic that nobody has strong opinions on. For me, guns have a lot of good memories. When I was young, I'd go skeet shooting with my dad, and I'd proudly take my 28 gauge shotgun out of the car, sling the bag of shells that I helped reload over my shoulder, and take my spot on the range. Now, if you haven't been skeet shooting a moving target's pretty hard. You've got to lead it just right, you've got to account for the wind, but when you hit it and you watch it explode, it's a really satisfying feeling. Guns have taught me a lot of life lessons. Patience and discipline, responsibility, safety, and hunting has taught me the value of life and death, as well as given me about 500 good venison recipes. So if you're interested during the break, we can swap some stories.
Venison.
I talked about guns so much when I was young that in 8th grade, my classmates named me most likely to be Annie Oakley in the Nick's Wild West show. And then when I was adult, I became a United States Marine. And guns taught me a lot of lessons again. As a young officer in Quantico, Virginia, training with an M16 was hard. And Marines are really competitive. So when I was able to qualify as an expert with both the rifle and the pistol, those feelings of pride, that sense of accomplishments comes rushing back. Guns were a central part of our discipline and our camaraderie and our brotherhood and sisterhood. But for those of us in the military after 9/11, guns became an everyday matter of life and death on deployment. I flew the AH-1 Whiskey Super Cobra attack helicopter. It was my job to kill the bad guys with guns, to keep our good guys with guns safe. As a Marine in Iraq, this was a common experience.
Get across! Go, 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 go,
Prince Harry?
Go, go,
Yo, maybe this is where his Prince Harry got that
line.
The sounds you just heard are United States Marines defending themselves with M4 rifles. The M4 is the military's version of the AR-15. The AR-15 may be the rifle that is the most difficult to talk about it. We've all seen them on the news, and after every tragic mass shooting, they come rushing back into our national conversations. There may not be a gun in production today that evokes so much emotion on both sides of the debate as the AR-15. But what is the AR-15, and how did it come to take its place in our national dialogues? The AR-15 was a game changer for US soldiers in Vietnam. Vietnam was a new type of conflict where soldiers had to walk miles and miles through dense jungle, and they were up against an enemy using the Soviet-made AK-47. In contrast, our troops had the heavier World War II era M1 Garand or M14 rifles. These rifles were big, bulky.
Yeah, listen, obviously I take issue with her language around the war, defending. Obviously, this was a country that we invaded on false pretenses, yada, yada, yada. That's not why I'm watching this. I'm watching this just to talk about the AR-15 as a literal weapon of war being used, being bought legally in this country, and then often being used in a mass shooting. So obviously, I'm with you guys on that. I know.
Hard to maneuver, and shot less rounds in less time than the AK-47. Our troops were outgunned, and the Army quickly realized that they needed a new service rifle. Armalite's AR-15 ended up fitting the bill. Now, the Armalite AR-15 was never designed to be a weapon of war, but the characteristics of it that made it ill-suited for hunting and many sporting pursuits make it ideal for combat. The Department of Defense took this platform and turned it into the iconic M16 service rifle. So what makes this weapon so ideally suited for combat? What makes it a near perfect weapon of war? There are four main things. First, it's light. The M16 was 3 pounds. That's nearly 30% lighter than the M1 or the M14. Now, if you've ever carried anything and walked for a really long time, 3 pounds add up really, really quickly. For foot-borne soldiers, this is a game changer. Second, it's shorter. The M16 is nearly half a foot shorter than the M1. This makes it more maneuverable, a lot easier to use when you're walking through dense jungle or on patrol. Third, it shoots smaller bullets. Now, these smaller bullets have three main advantages. Number one, they too are lighter. In Vietnam, soldiers were able to carry 4 times as much ammunition with the M16 as they were with their previous service rifles for the same amount of weight. Next, you can shoot more rounds in less time. Previous service rifles suffered from overheating, and they could shoot for 2, maybe 3 minutes, and their heavy weight meant that there were 8 to 10 round magazines. The AR-15 platform was designed to shoot hundreds of bullets sequentially, and the light weight of the round meant that 30-round magazines became very common. More time shooting, less time reloading, more time killing. Third, small bullets do more damage. On the right is an X-ray of a larger round, similar to that you would see in the M1. It goes cleanly through the human body. On the left, damage from an AR-15 that upon entering the skin starts to ricochet, shattering bones and causing previously unheard of damage to the human body. Finally, it's the muzzle velocity of the M16. If you remember from your physics class, force equals mass times velocity squared. The muzzle velocity of the M16 was nearly 3 times that of their previous weapons. As a result, that square, there is 9 times as much killing force in this weapon. By the time the Army adopted the M16 in 1965, it could shoot through both sides of a standard issue military helmet at 500 meters, while causing previously unseen damage to the human body, all while being lighter, more maneuverable, and easier to use. This is a weapon made for war.
Okay, so
since 1960,
this is the whole point of this TED Talk, right? Now listen, I understand that most of you in here, you get it, right? When we're talking about banning assault weapons, and even though the NRA tries to define an assault weapon as a fully automatic one, right? And an AR-15 is a semi-automatic. It doesn't matter. A semi-automatic rifle like the AR-15 does not belong anywhere but in war. So obviously, yes, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but you never know. There's always somebody who maybe doesn't just fully understand that. Or when we talk about this debate, it's like, this is something that I genuinely think if people fully understand what we're talking about here, there is no reason why you would not believe that these should be banned. And yet, we just can't seem to fucking do it. Can't seem to do it. And if your politician is not doing something as simple as being down to ban an assault weapon, then they shouldn't be in office. Like, they are responsible for every single mass shooting with a semi-automatic or whatever that happens.
65, our servicemen and women have been carrying some variant of the AR platform into combat with them. Now, it's important to note that this is not a fully automatic machine gun. This is a semi-automatic rifle. But it can still be shot very quickly and do a lot of damage. Just how quickly can someone shoot one of these?
These are all the people who were killed.
That's how fast someone can shoot 30 rounds, one magazine from an AR-15.
I think that was in Vegas.
The faces you just saw are 30 Americans who have lost their life to a bullet from an AR-15 inside the border of the United States, shot by another American citizen. When I was in the Marine Corps, then General, now our Secretary of Defense, Mattis, used to always say, every time an American kills another American, we're doing the enemy's job for them. And this amount of loss of life would nearly shut down combat operations to figure out what we did wrong that so many Americans died. It was never too soon to talk about it. So, if you want to kill a lot of people at middle distance really quickly, this is a perfect tool for the job. It doesn't mean it's the perfect weapon for everything. That same damage that the bullets from the AR-15 do to human body, they do to animals, making this an ill-suited hunting rifle. That bullet that can travel through a service helmet also goes through walls, and they go far, meaning that if you're using this for home defense, there's a good chance you're going to shoot somebody else in the house and possibly even your neighbors. In many states, hunting with these weapons is illegal for this very reason. So if they are ill-suited for these purposes, why do American civilians own AR-15s? Well, according to Bushmaster, you may not be a man if you don't have one.
Hell yeah, brother.
These weapons are prolific. Advertised as the very same weapons our servicemen use in Iraq, since they have been reintroduced into the civilian market in 2004, they have exploded in popularity.
2004. What happened in 2004? The assault weapons ban was expired. And then these pervaded into the hands of Americans like chlamydia. Like chlamydia hits people who frequent the Abbey. I don't know. That was a terrible metaphor.
There's no record of how many of these are in civilian hands. In fact, in many states, it is illegal to keep any record of gun ownership.
Like chlamydia hit me when I was 21. Yeah. Like chlamydia was being passed around to all the people who are on the reality show MILF Manor.
But the NRA estimates that there are 8 million of them owned by civilians these days.
8 million!
8 million. There hasn't been a declared war on U.S. soil in 150 years. And
bro, I am so sick of this fucking country, man. Okay, we're out here doing all the invading and then acting like people are gonna invade us to the point that we all need to be equipped with AR-15s. You know, the way that people arm themselves in America, you would think that we lived in a war-torn country. Right? When in reality, the terrorism that hits us the most is domestic terrorism. That is the terrorism that we need to be the most concerned on. You know? And the domestic terrorism, or the domestic terrorists, are using guns like the AR-15.
And yet we are bringing weapons specifically designed to kill as many enemy as fast as possible onto our streets. I went into combat to ensure that Americans are able to live their lives freely, and they are being killed by these weapons, and we're still saying it's not time to talk about it. Now, the Constitution gets evoked every time the gun debate comes up. So it is important to look at the preamble, the foundation on which every amendment to our Constitution is built. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty on ourselves and our posterity.
I had to memorize this shit
Do
in junior
ordain
high.
and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Is it a more perfect union that we are creating when we bring weapons of war onto our streets? Is it domestic tranquility that our students are engaged in active shooter drills? Is it a blessing of liberty that neither ourselves nor our posterity can go to school, a church, a concert, or even a hospital,
a dance hall,
without the fear of hearing this?
Holy
Trigger warning. Sorry, trigger warning.
Oh my God!
Some guns taught me life lessons. Some guns brought me closer to my family. Some guns helped me make delicious meals for my friends. Some
that was
are weapons of war. Shooting skeet was really fun when I was a little girl, and it's still a lot of fun now. But killing people, watching your friends die, and the emotional and physical trauma that is with you every day after is not. Weapons of war do not belong in American places of peace. Thank you.
Pretty fucking simple. You know, this is not anything groundbreaking, and yet here we are. Here we are. And you know, obviously there are a lot of other things that we need to address when looking at mass shooters, right? For young men, that is the anger that the anger and the inability to understand repercussions of actions. That is a reason why so often mass shooters are young men, right? But then in the last week, we've had mass shooters who are old and Asian and immigrants. And that is another conversation that needs to be addressed. And then in there somewhere is, of course, mental health and domestic violence. And yeah, like there's a lot of conversations, but what do all of these have in common? Guns. Guns. Every single fucking shooting is guns. Gotta be honest, that TED Talk really didn't say much other than I like guns, but I also understand there's a problem. I mean, I think that TED Talk is specifically geared towards people who are pro-gun, right? Pro-hunter, pro-hunting, pro-gun. Maybe people who, even if they're not like, hell yeah, I'm going to go out and buy my AR-15, they might be of the mindset that, well, that's the Second Amendment, and right? I think that's who that was specifically addressed to, which is why the woman giving the TED Talk was somebody who obviously is pro-gun, okay, pro-military, pro-hunting. She is someone who probably has her own guns outside of the ones that she used in the military, and so that's why she was explaining, these, like, just really, really, really hammering home that these semi-automatic weapons, like the AR-15, like the ones that were used in the shootings this week, those are weapons of war, and I know this because I used them in war. Guns don't kill people, people kill people. Yeah, of course. I mean, that's been the line for years now, right? For years. You were in the military? Yeah. I was out here. Me and Prince Harry. We were shooting the bad guys. Cadet Kwan. Have you heard of Cadet Kelly? Well, Cadet Kelly wished that she was Cadet Kwan. Yeah. No, I was, if it's not clear that I'm being facetious, I was not in the military. No, the military propaganda never got me. Okay, I was too into theater. There was no way that those army commercials were going to bring me in. Okay, the only lieutenant I wanted to play was on screen. Sure, I'll be in the army if I'm in a movie. Maybe my legs have been blown off. The aftermath of the Vietnam War. And I have to learn to not only walk, but love again. Well, thinking about getting a shrimping boat. Coming this fall. Now I'm picturing like Hallmark on the Hallmark Channel. A miracle, a Christmas miracle for the military gal, Lieutenant Kwan. Saving Private Kwan. What happened to your legs, Lieutenant Kwan? Alrighty. 9:30. I gotta check in with William real quick because we're supposed to go to this birthday party, and I've been texting Will and he's not responding. So I would like to know how much time I have left to stream. So hold on, please. This bitch waved me off. I got the wave. Mm-hmm. I'm like, listen, I will go on my own, sir. The Anne Hathaway vid making the rounds. I already know what this is. I already know what this is because I've watched it 1,000 times. Listen, I'm sorry, okay? I know I was an Anne Hathaway hater, but it feels good to be a recovered Anne Hathaway hater. All right? I'm so happy to support her now. So I've watched this video a lot. Yeah, anyway. What's the tea with Anne? Oh, I can't get into it. Can't get into my history of being a Hatha hater. Because I gotta get off. So. All right,
5
y'all.
months. Time flies.
Hey, Sky Eva. Thank you for the 5 months. Time does fly. It does. It's been great, though. Okay, y'all. I know today was a heavy news day. So just take care of yourselves always. Please do not go watch the footage if unless you're sitting here in chat being like, I think the police are great. Go watch the footage. But everyone else, I watched it so you didn't have to. And it really is not necessary to watch because it's you can not only predict what will happen, but it's been pretty well documented by people online that it is really terrible. So anywho, I would just encourage you to to not watch it unless you really think you need to. Okay. So tomorrow I will be back. Hopefully nothing news-wise happens in between now and tomorrow, because I really love for tomorrow not to be as heavy of a news day. But anywho, listen, I always appreciate the respectfulness that a lot of you have when we are covering topics like the ones that we covered tonight. I'm a very different streamer from somebody like Hassan, where part of his brand is kind of yelling at people. And I really prefer not to do that. So again, thank you for not causing me to do that. I appreciate it, okay? Don't worry, you'll get there. Probably. But I'm trying to not get there until I have to. Yeah. You know, that is the beauty of having a smaller community. When you get to a certain size, all hell breaks loose. So, I'm going to raid. Let's see. I'm gonna eat. I will. I had to get on stream. This boy. Okay, I'm gonna send you over to Ariana Jasmine. She is also a political lady on Twitch, and I love to support her. So I'm sure she's doing politics. If you're done for the day, go off somewhere and have an enjoyable evening. But otherwise, please be the lovely. Oh, fuck me. God damn it. Why do I always fuck this shit up? Okay. There we go. I am so bad at doing raids. Anywho, I'll see y'all tomorrow. Have a great night. Thank you as always. Peace out. I am yelling like Hassan now. God damn it. Goodbye.